Okay, thank you very much. How long was that?
That was about 55 minutes.
55, so that was about 35 minutes. Oh. No, 50. Okay, that's it. Now there's, let's see. I think I do.
Right.
You're going to see the great culture of Egypt. Egypt has, reportedly, the widest variety of architecture that I'm going to show you in the world. It has Islamic influences and so forth, and modern. This is Nadim, as it says. He is with this great NGO with Khalid Ali. Khalid Ali, the presidential candidate, the human rights attorney who won in court the doubling of the minimum wage to now $115 a month. He won it for not just state workers, but for the first time in history, private workers. This leaves out the informal sector, that middle sector, 40% earn $2. The decisive, demoralized, isolated. They don't work in a workplace. They work individually. They don't have the same confidence as the workers at the factory. This young man, Nadim, is 22 years old, and he is the executive director of this organization. Unbelievable. And he is unbelievably knowledgeable. He supports the Egyptian Federation of Independent Trade Unions that was formed, and you'll read about it, was formed in Tahrir Square. This young woman, 28 years old, an attorney, human rights attorney, is a representative of the AFLCIO. She represents the other trade union federation that exists, and she has a tattoo on this hand, right there, Coptic tattoo. And she's another young. It's just fantastic. Okay. Oh, you know what? Which way am I going here?
You just did previous.
Okay, let me try this. Okay, I'm going the right way. I have had many missteps in my life. Okay, this is the architecture. This is just unbelievable. This is Islamic architecture. It's just, to me, I just think it's just so fantastic. And there's sections which are far more modern and so forth. This has a little bit too much print there for some reason. I'll clean it up. But these are street scenes, very common. Look at this young child going through the garbage. Look at this young child, a vendor, the 40%. He's not in school. That's why there's so much poverty. And seeing children work the streets and not be in school is just crushing. Crushing. Yeah, the UN says 40% live on $2 a day. Typical street scene, even outside stores, you'll have vendors outside doing the exchange.
This is Cairo?
Cairo, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is only Cairo. This young boy here helping his mother. That was a common, as I say, I was struck by this because I got food poisoning from a pizza joint right here. I couldn't resist. And I saw the person, this is part of the reality, underdeveloped world, different bacteria. And I saw him making the dough with his hand. I said, that could be trouble. Because he just wiped off the counter, everything. He was with his hand. They don't have a lot of running water, as you know, and soap and so forth. Different culture. And I thought the oven would kill the bacteria. Anyway, this is another family member, and they're trying to get the fruit and the vegetables all prepared. Okay, this is the National Democratic Party, the party that was outlawed, that ran everything for Mubarak. Had the majority in the parliament under his regime. And this is the magnificent, I told you about, Museum of Antiquity. Now they're moving everything inside here to the pyramids. But it's like the rest of Cairo in the sense it's not kept up that much, but they're 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years old. It's not like a Western museum where everything's described very nicely. It's air conditioned, a lot of nice glass around it. It's a little, doesn't have those standards, but it's unbelievable what it is. Now these are Mahmoud Street. This is right off to here. This is the Ministry of Interior, which had some rocks thrown at it. This is the scene of many of the battles that I described in November and December. November the youth, and December the women. And this is Malik Mustafa. He's a law student at one of the most prestigious civil rights NGOs in Cairo. And he lost the eye. He's the one who I interviewed last year. If I showed you slides from last year, Now this is what they're doing around the Ministry of Interior because it was such a target for protests so regularly. All around they build these. And then people write, you know, their own thing, you know, F.U. military, down with the military. These are all people's kind of revolutionary slogans, I've been told and translated. But they just are stopping things. Now, protests will just spontaneously happen. Now, you can be in parts of Cairo, by the way, where you won't know any of this happened. This is downtown. This is 2 miles from Tahrir. So there are other parts which you can just go where you don't know anything. And this is where they, you know, the few tourists that do come, they come in buses right to the Museum of Antiquity that I showed you, and they go right back into their buses and go. I mean, Tahrir Square is 300 yards away, and they just don't have anything to do with it. This demonstration was about the martyrs and the victims. The police, the 1 or 2 that have been arrested have gotten off. They haven't done enough for these martyrs, which are constantly growing. So they're marching to the court building. You see that right there? And I want to show you, they're young. They're young. It's fantastic. This is the hope of the future. They have not been crushed. They will not be crushed or defeated anytime soon. You'll know it when it happens. And I described why I did not think the working class can be crushed so easily. They'll be, it's more the confusion and constantly, you have to take the time to build the mass movement around concrete demands. They recognize that. Not just protests down with the military. This is women. This struck me because you see these women. Women, veiled and unveiled, were present last year in all the protests. Not so much this year. That's why this was very unique to me. Here's a person with a patch on his eye right there. Because there were women. Women in this protective society, I think, have been kept home from the protests after the December. That certainly was the target. That certainly was the motivation of the military courthouse that I showed you. Now, this was the day before the January 25th anniversary. I knew there would be a huge crowd January 25th, right? And this is, look, I don't know what that print is, but that's Mubarak with a noose. That's Tantawi, the military head of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, who runs everything, and that's a member of Parliament, a leading person. So they're already starting to get ready. And on the day, the Wednesday, that was it. Nobody went to work. It was shut down. And now the military had to declare it a national holiday for freedom. Not a National Police Day, as Mubarak's. Everything was just down. Now, there were no police, no army, anywhere around. Unlike last year, where I had trouble getting in because I had a camera. They didn't want to let me in the military. I got in. That's a whole other kind of funny story. But these are Salafists with the beard, both Salafists. And you had to be frisked. Everybody was friendly. You can police yourself, even with the disagreements people had. On that day, there was absolutely no violence. Everybody getting frisked.
On your way into Tahrir Square?
Yeah, the whole perimeter, square mile. Tahrir Square is very small, a few hundred yards. But the perimeter, people come, they take over the whole square mile area.
And it was the frisking was shared by a variety of...
Oh, absolutely. This day, as you'll see the crowds. There were Salafists, youth, women. This was their day of the revolution, 1-year anniversary of January 25th. Now, a political strike was called for February 11th, a few weeks later. Very few showed up, only tens of thousands. And that was noted as, again, I think confirming my point, the point of some revolutionaries. You know, the political, down with the military, political slogans, you got to come more down to earth, take the time to build energy and around immediate demands. You know, not give up the political, but have the demonstrations for, you know, increasing the minimum wage, increase subsidies, tax the corporations, cut the military budget, blah, blah, blah. And that's their same lesson that they're going through on this revolution. Yes?
You might have said that already, but who are the people that frisks others?
That's every volunteer from everybody. Trade unionists, Salafists, Muslim Brotherhood. These are mostly Muslim Brotherhood here, I think. Everybody did it cooperatively. The whole square mile perimeter, you could not get in there without being frisked. And they just were looking for weapons. Not like the military that was frisking me and not letting me in with a camera last year. But everyone's friendly. You see that? Smiles. Now, this is the scene of... Now, the demonstration, the assembly at Tahrir Square, and I'll show you Tahrir, the center, is 10 a.m. to about 8 p.m. Tens of thousands leaving, tens of thousands coming in throughout the whole day. And there were just hundreds of thousands. This was 12 noon. I don't know where that print came in. But these are trade unions. This was the trade union delegation from one of the work sites. And they all have pictures of martyrs. And just feeder marches all over. This is more just people coming in. This is a militant youth here section. You just see, you look for women. You find very few women. This is, to me, very noticeable for the reasons I indicated. But also look for the youth. Look, this is the hope. Okay, now it's starting to really build big. And I'm going to draw a contrast between the Muslim Brotherhood here and the rest. The rest raised political demands. You saw them with the pictures of the martyrs and, you know, down with the military and, you know, tax the corporate. They had economic and political demands mixed in. All these people. But then you had the Muslim Brotherhood right here. Now, this is another example of the political people. This is slogans down with the military. So he's got tape over his mouth, shut up, you know, against that politician. But this is the Muslim Brotherhood stage. They did it right under, this is Tahrir Square, this was Victory Square, this was set up, Nasser getting rid of King Farouk, and it's a nationalist symbol of Egyptian independence. Right there, you see that? Okay, and the Muslim Brotherhood took over the center stage right under that, early in the morning. And they're surrounded by their supporters, tens of thousands, and their banner says no political slogans whatsoever. I couldn't get too much closer. Here I am. It just was a lot of people. Absolutely no problem in security. Every once in a while last year, people would say, is he a spy? And because there's no other, you won't see any, I didn't see any European, I didn't see anybody except Egyptians. Now the news people, they're up here, and they're up here, and they're up here with their cameras doing stuff. But you see some people, reporters here, but not too many. And you don't see any tourists.
Why aren't the reporters there? Are they afraid?
Pardon? Oh, yeah, they're afraid. They're afraid.
Why?
Well, there has been violence, as I've described, you know, a lot of violence by the military and so forth. So unless you're political and understand where the violence is coming from, I mean, I felt totally safe here. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood has had counter demonstrations, as I said. And when I was in there, the opening day of Parliament, they had a counter demonstration against the demands by workers for economic reform. That's the first time Muslim Brotherhood actually engaged in a counter demonstration. And then the second time, that was the opening of Parliament around January 27th, whatever, this year. And then March 8th, they did it again, I read in the newspaper, against women. Now, if they are enlisted to do that kind of more aggressive public stance, then that's really, but they're going to have problems because they're not an institution that owns some part of the economy. They're a mass organization that has religious support and for their charity that I described. They can fracture and they can split if they start acting like a direct arm of the police and the army. Now here I am, I'm trying to get close on this banner. 2 days later, a Friday, this is a Wednesday, protesters surrounded this area. They still had this many people, there, you know, tens of thousands of supporters of the Muslim, but there were so many chants from protesters, like these women who are the Women for Change. They just formed an organization, Women for Change, who told me about, you know, this Islamists and military, they're not civil, that's what we fought for. These are the people who are raising political demands, like this man, dignified, just stood there and said, you know, get rid of the military. They surrounded the Muslim Brotherhood with chants of, you know, this is not a celebration, you're in Parliament, we're in prison. Revolution must continue. There was so much protest there, peaceful, a little shoving and pushing, that's it. No violence. they took down their banner. Just say, you know, it's not worth it. That's the pressure they're under. They're strong. They have mass support. They have not lost that yet. But there is opposition. There's another wing of Muslims included. Their political wing, 2 parties have left the Muslim Brotherhood political wing party and formed their own. And there is a minority in the party that supports revolutionary struggle continuing for reforms and so forth. It's very small but very vocal, and everyone thinks they're going to be kicked out. But these women, weren't they great? But that's, look, there's no other women. That's why I thought these were so brave. Okay, now you're seeing the crowd. Look at that. You can't even see this Tahrir monument because it's not even in the picture. This is all adjacent. These are all non-Muslim Brotherhood people away from their stage. And they got these political slogans all over. There, see how far away we are from the Muslim Brotherhood stage? It was packed. And remember, there was thousands leaving, thousands coming, but there were not the children, the families that I saw last year. Terror works. Constantly appealing to people's need for stability works. And you have to adjust to it. A long-term strategy that focuses on their immediate needs. That's why I took these. I don't know what that is there, but I'll take it out for the next time I speak. And that's just touching. Kind of, that's revolution. That's deep. When you see, and last year, that was all over. Children, women, veiled and unveiled, with the Egyptian flag draping them, walking. See, the women didn't throw stones, but they stood between the military, violent military, and the front lines during the 18 days. They ran the commissaries. They ran communications. They performed, and they were killed. They are among the martyrs. This is the day after January 25th anniversary, and this is an engineer. He's staying there. He's friends of the doctor who lost both eyes. He wants to stay to keep a public image. It's like this country. It's not their primary focus, the encampments, but you had a couple hundred people here who said, I think this is an attorney, there's a couple other people, you know, who, well, we'll stay a couple of 30 days about it, I think I'll stay. Right after this picture was taken, that young man gave me the peace sign. And I was so touched. I thought now I should go back and retake it, but I just was so touched by that. And I just gave him a hug, and he hugged me. And just most courageous people. Look at that. Young. They read, they talk, they discuss. Their organization level under a dictatorship did not have a chance to develop or mature, and that's the dilemma. I think that is it for that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I hope you're able to now understand future events. That's what really my purpose was. Not to describe exactly what's going on here, but to describe the social political forces at work. So,
what's next in the roadmap for Egypt? I know they had the couple of elections in a row now that have been questionable in terms of how well they've been run. What's next?
Well, again, that's kind of a good question, because the opposition to the elections by the youth and the trade unions, and the AFLCIO supported trade unions opposed having the elections, right, actually, because they said it's premature. What they meant was, we're not organized. What my point was, the progressive side, the youth side that made the revolution, the trade union side, they're not organized for all the reasons I indicated. It's only the other side that's best organized, so they win the elections, they'll win the presidency, they'll rewrite the Constitution.
When is the presidential election?
It's before, I think the presidential election is first, and it changes all the time, but this I think is May now. Okay. Before the end of May, and then they'll write the Constitution a couple months later, which, as I said, everyone says, well, that's kind of ridiculous. We're electing someone who we don't know, the Constitution does not yet define its powers. Now, remember, in line with what Sadat said, the Constitution has in it that Sharia law heavily influences all legislation. Before that, it said Sharia law will, under Mubarak, it said Sharia law will influence. Then they added influence it a lot. Now the Salafists in Parliament want to have it say exclusive effect on it. So that's what they're talking about. They're taking it off like the right wing here, taking it off in a whole nother direction, away from dealing with the problems, the immediate problems. And that's why I think I have confidence that if the progressive student youth and the fighters, they'll be successful if they advance these demands, because the Muslim Brotherhood is not, and the military is not, because they're part of the 1%, and the Muslim Brotherhood does not have that political agenda. They have an agenda of the status quo, because they are now not outlawed, they are not repressed. As a matter of fact, they're getting money for the role they're playing, the political wing. So, yes?
I was just wondering, what's been the role of either the revolutionary socialists or other left-wing forces in the Egyptian revolution?
Well, good question. Now, I met with a lot of people, as I said, call themselves revolutionaries, and like Malik, who was blinded. And the revolutionary socialists as a group, they are the oldest socialist group. They were around in the 50s, and they were repressed. And their leaders have been, one attorney was just arrested last week. And they keep fighting. They're young. They're in the front lines. And they are the ones who the Muslim Brotherhood spokesperson attacked and said they're Marxist, and they're calling for the military to fall, which would be anarchy. And the head of the Revolutionary Socialists said, yes, we are for the army leaving power. It's not anarchy, it's called, people's democracy, or something like that, they said. So they stood strong, and the mass support at that time, they backed off. But they're constantly being repressed. Kamal Abbas, who won an award from the AFLCIO, was a noted steelworker under Mubarak, was imprisoned and so forth. He's head of one of the big independent confederations. He's been working not as a steelworker since 1989, but as a promoter of independent unions under Mubarak. He's just been arrested because he went to a European conference and attacked, they say slandered, not attacked, but spoke against one of the leaders of the old union, Mubarak's old confederation. When they got back to Egypt, he's arrested. April 8th, he will learn his sentence, and that's a very important thing. So actually, I'm circulating a petition to the San Francisco Labor Council. People signed it, and my union people signed it. And what it says is, the first two names here is my union president, me, and someone else from SEIU here, another one. It says, about what I just said about Kamal Abbas, and if April 8th he calls for a defense, I want to send these names, and the 100 I have others, to the AFLCIO, so it can be used, free Kamal Abbas. So if any of you have titles, you look like very important people here in this room. In the trade union movement, we give each other titles. Worker isn't enough. So we give, steward, give me a title, Does it have a stipend associated with it? That's even
Venerated Vice Chairman.
That's, yeah. So if you have a title, or, like Occupy Boston, something like that, or please sign it, okay? Mm-hmm. And then please don't let it hang around, make sure I get it. Thank you. It just says, so there is repression still against anyone that opens their mouth. But it's not like under the Mubarak. There's more eyes on it, and you have a mass movement ready to join with you. Why? Because it has not been defeated. It's not as well organized, but it's not been defeated.
What's the state of the press? Is there a free press there?
No. Well, actually, there's a break. It all was the government press, but under this impact, and you've had newscasters fired because of it. So there is, to my knowledge, no independent journal. That it's mostly from the government. But there are sources that come out, like our independent Al-Aram, Al Jazeera, you should read, El Jadalaya. I'm mispronouncing these, but they're all on my list of favorites. There's bloggers, and there's other groups that have come on. They do some very good reporting.
If these bloggers come out against the regime, they
Yes.
run the risk of being
Absolutely,
assaulted,
and they have.
imprisoned.
The leading blogger has been censored, imprisoned, and threatened. He's well known to the West. I forget his name offhand, but El Hamai Way or something. Yes, sir.
Thanks. I had to come see and hear somebody who is a contributor to Counterpunch.
Thank you. Why is that? You support it, huh?
Well, yeah. And I know the people who, I know Alex.
Oh, yeah, they worked their head off.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's great. It's a great website.
Yes.
I have two questions. The first is, can you clarify a little, and I did come in late, so you may have already talked about this. Are all this, basically all of the organizations, political tendencies, parties, are they all at least nominally legal in this environment, while at the same time there's ongoing repression? That's the first question, sort of. So what's the nominal legal environment? And the second thing has to do with the history of covert intervention. Part of it would have to do with the history of the AFLCIO when AFL was manipulated by the CIA, I think mainly in Latin America. The American, what was it, AFL?
AFL, American Institute for Freedom.
Labor Development.
Yeah.
And I guess that's really not the same anymore. I mean, that really isn't
Good
what's
question.
happening. But can the AFL's role now be trusted in a way that it wouldn't have been? And the companion side, piece to this side would be the National Endowment for Democracy,
Yeah.
which many people have argued when, sort of is what used to be the CIA has now been legitimated in a more open form in these institutions like the National Endowment for Democracy, which is quite interesting because it's been the government has been, the military government have been engaged in a sort of seeming public campaign against the NED in Egypt.
Right. Good questions. The first one I'll answer is what's the AFL-CIO's role? It used to, the AFL-CIO, we used to call it the AFL-CIA because it would intervene to build up unions that were appendages of the U.S. Imperial State Department policy. It's changed when the AFL-CIO switched leadership 15 years ago. But you still have the national, NED is still funding, and the State Department still funds Solidarity House, which helps unions in Egypt form, trains stewards, develops. That is still the case. But the role that they're playing at this stage is very good at this stage. But you cannot divorce your understanding from who funds you. But at this stage, the needs are so primitive. Just train me as a steward. And they back up their right to be independent of the Mubarak regime, which was against the State Department policy, actually, who supported Mubarak. And that's why the Army's independence, I told you because of their economic status, they are the 1%. They have a certain amount of independence, and they're getting mad at the United States NGOs and others messing in their business, telling them what to do. And that they're flexing their muscle a little bit because they don't want any criticism. They don't want anything like that. And that speaks to the nominally legal. The trade unions in one of the confederations and a couple of unions, half a dozen, the 50,000 member employee government workers union, the health workers union, they've been recognized by a section of the government, military controlled government. It's not in the Constitution yet to be rewritten. The current Constitution is the old Constitution, which only legally recognizes the Egyptian Trade Union Federation. So none of the groups have real, I would call, that's a good word to use, they're nominally legal because of the relationship of forces. You've got this huge mass movement scrutinizing everything the military does, especially on an undemocratic level, but they have not legalized it formally. So the next guy can come around and say, next military guy or ruler, even democratically elected one, can say, oh no, you're not recognized. So they that. Now the AFLCIO takes a position on that and wants to legitimize it, have it in the Constitution. Solidarity House, I think, is doing a good job now, but your point is well taken. Yes. Anything else? Did you learn something, I hope, please?
Are you going back?
Oh yeah, I'll go back. I'm trying to, I gotta raise a little money, to tell you the truth. You know, United Airlines, they took our pension, and then the government took it over, and yeah, see. So but you know what? I'm like you guys. I'm compelled by courage of young people.
From your perspective, as you stood down with all the people, who were the rest of the press afraid of being down there from? Violence from who?
Yeah. Well, you remember the one woman in the last years, right after Mubarak fell, where she was sexually assaulted, the famous newswoman. And that's just, those were not people who were, see, the revolution brought everybody into it quickly. And those were just neighborhood thugs, and they're very sexist. It's, you know, and wherever you have that religious orthodoxy, you know from being in the United States, it's just misogyny. You know, women should be in the place. If you're out here in a big square, a rally, being politically active, well, you must be loose. Yeah. Especially if you're staying overnight and in the encampments. So, you know, it's some of it's stereotypical fear that's blown out of proportion. Some of it's based in reality. But so newscasters, I didn't see any, except this great stringer, you know, from Britain, for AP photographer. He was great. He was a veteran. He had his bandana on. He had his, you know, the Arab scarf. I forget what you call him. He was fast talking, and he would. I just got back from Afghanistan, and I mean, he was just unbelievable guy. And then his Australian friend came, and they stay in the good hotels, and they're talking about all the scandalous things they did at the bar. I mean, it was like a stereotype of foreign roving photographers, you know, drinking and partying, you know. Pardon me, but you know, did that woman call you last night? They're saying to each other. I'm going, oh my God. So anyway. It was, but they were impacted by this. Yeah. I said it was like bloody Beirut what they did to these kids. So, you know, I forgive them their other sins of not being totally political. Yes.
At 5 o'clock, I think that's the prayer time. Like, would the demonstrators in Tahrir Square, would they start praying?
Oh yeah. Listen, you know, the Muslims, of course, pray 5 times a day. And for a couple minutes each, doesn't have to be long. And I have an unbelievable slide, you know, from last year of just tens of thousands in Tahrir, you know, bowing. It's extremely dramatic. So yeah, they had prayer service. Muslim Brotherhood would conduct prayer service at the start of the day, every time they assembled in Tahrir.
5 times a day?
5 times a day they pray. Yeah, absolutely, they do it wherever you are. You've got to take off your shoes. You've got to bow down, preferably be on a rug. I mean, outside my hotel, because I stayed in a hotel, $40 a night. It's great. Yeah, I'm trying to raise money. Believe me, I fly for free, because United Airlines, they took the pension, they kept benefits, thank God. And but then I stay, and I eat off the vendors, and I get sick. I'll be more careful this time. I'll stay away from the pizza. The food is delicious.
Did you go to any of the other Arab Spring countries, Tunisia?
No. You know, Egypt is different. There's more clarity for me there. The social forces are more clearly defined. It's the largest country, as I said, the largest economy. It is more classical textbook struggle. Has all the same problems you can relate to here. If you go to Libya or Yemen or you know, the tribalism and the different aspects of it, because those countries are not as well developed. You know, Egypt has aluminum, has steel, concrete factories, natural gas. They don't have the big crude oil, but they got natural gas, and they have a real infrastructure. So that's why I went there. It was greater clarity.
Do we still outsource our torture there?
I don't believe we'd send torture to Egypt anymore. We don't have that relationship with that army anymore, for the reasons I explained, and there would be public scrutiny. See, there's a big opposition to having this peace accord with Egypt. I mean, with Israel. The Muslim Brotherhood has met with the Zionists and has not participated in any anti-demonstrations against them. And that's causing a problem. That's another issue. People think we should embrace the demands of the Palestinian people instead of just giving back the land that Egypt lost. So they've, you know, Egypt has invaded some of the territory and attacked a couple of Egyptian citizens in that.
In the Sinai.
Yeah.
This was a few months ago.
Yeah, a few months ago, and the military has had to take position. So that's still evolving.
After, I believe SCAF released a number of Palestinian prisoners.
Yeah, they've taken steps.
And so these people went right down to the Sinai and caused a lot of trouble for SCAF and for the Israelis.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, it's evolving. Their position, if this peace agreement will stand up, whether the nationalization, there's demands from the unions to nationalize more. Because these properties are foreign owned or they're owned by the most corrupt. See, everything's intact. If you want everything to stay the same, change everything. But of course, nothing ever changes fundamentally except the complexion of who's ruling. So these corrupt owners of factories, and they hire, one of the most immediate demands on why it is possible to build a mass movement that just doesn't say down with the military and have a confrontation at the Ministry of Interior, because you will say, we want to stop contract labor. We want to be permanent workers with a contract, therefore. Not, you know, we want to extend natural gas subsidies to the vendors who use them, to others who need them to heat their homes, not to the corporations. There's plenty of issues. And the youth know it, and the trade unionists know it. What they have a problem doing is the trade union movement, because they're so urgently involved in their own problems of getting a decent wage, they forget, well, they fail sometimes to link up with the political demands of the youth movement, end police brutality, justice for the martyrs, down with the military, and the youth, for the same reason, much consumed with their own broader political, you know, sometimes forget to link up with the economic demands, bringing the two groups together. And that takes a sophisticated understanding, which is easier to achieve than organization that brings them together. That's the hardest. And that's where the leftist groups that you spoke about, and I'm not an expert on it because they were all underground and repressed, but I did meet the group you mentioned. They play an honorable role. I think more and more are coming to that consciousness, but can they achieve the level of organization necessary to make these connections, not only between the union and the youth, but to the mass that is demoralized and doesn't want Tahir, wants jobs, wants, you know, peace, justice, bread. What their demand is bread and justice. Yes? Or
just to expand on what you said about Israel, what did you find was the salience, if you will, of the situation in Gaza in particular, and opening up the border? Was that something that was sort of present for you as you were during your visit?
Yeah, I think the whole Israeli and Palestinian thing is in the minds of the most conscious people, and I think has the sympathy of the majority of people, no doubt. But it's not on the top of the political agenda for action, except by that most conscious layer outside the Israeli embassies and stuff. They're smaller, in the hundreds. But the consciousness is there, but there's just so much other things to address first, is what I think. Yes, sir?
I was just hoping for a brief reminder of who or what are Salafists or Salafists.
Right, Salafists are the extreme Muslim religious-driven organization with the beards. And, you know, I've read and I've been told, but I had a Muslim brother dispute it, but that they're very similar, an offshoot of the Wahidi sect that rules Saudi Arabia.
The Wahhabis.
Wahhab?
Wahhabis.
What? Yeah. And, but in any case, wherever their origins, they are not subject to mass pressure. They're just driven by their interpretation of the Quran, all the worst interpretations, rather, of the Quran, about women, about the Sharia law, justice, you know, sacrifice, and, you know, and they support the military, of course. But the Muslim Brotherhood is different. They're not, they were charity, social work, religious instruction. That was orthodox, but their political wing feigns seculars because they know they cannot get very far. The Salafists got 20%. Muslim Brotherhood had almost 50% support. They project a secular image, and they take that esteemed reputation they gain for their work to earn that. But it's going to, like the military, in 1 year. You know, when I went after Mubarak fell, I could not ask any question against the military. I would say, why do you have so much faith in the military? And everybody, from all classes, young and old, would talk about how the unique character, they've never repressed us, they got rid of Mubarak, they're with us, and there was a lot of fraternization, but that's the lower level. And now, I couldn't find anyone to say a good word. Those women, those older women, did you see them in Tahrir? Women for Change. One was a school teacher, and you know, she just, military and Islamist, that's not secular, that's not what we fought for. Well, they don't have the credibility, but they have the guns, they have the power, and the Muslim Brotherhood, as I said, to repeat, has the organization. So don't let the elections, that does not reflect, distorted reflection of reality. I mean, there's truth to it, but you got to understand the truth behind when you see the Islamists win so much.
But you mentioned a little while ago, Muslim Brotherhood does a lot like Hamas does with creating medical clinics and teaching people and setting up madrasas and other schools and things.
Right.
You know, the Muslim Brotherhood in the history of Egypt has gone through, you know, their period in time when they were completely, it was forbidden to be, and then more recently they were kind of tolerated, and now they're embraced. How much credibility do you think they're going to have going forward if they're tools of SCAF?
Well, I think it'll erode, but I think the credibility of such a large mass organization, when that has such a history of 84 years, it's religious instruction, charity work, that is so powerful, they are not going to lose credibility easily, in my opinion. It's a struggle, a big struggle, because you compare it to this country with the Democratic Party. Now, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, you know, how many...
Extrajudicial killings of American citizens?
Yeah, you know, yeah, right, you can kill. So, I mean, you know, some of us can point out what they do. So once you get mass support, there's usually a reason behind it, and then you got to deal in Egypt with the middle layer of demoralized. The majority, some of the people I interviewed, and this is from afar my impression of just revolutionary situations I've read about, that engage in this stalemate kind of thing that's going on. The middle layer is not only decisive, but it's in Egypt. It is tired and exhausted, and you can see why. I just really want to emphasize that. You got to understand.
But are they too tired to demand change?
Yes, they want it miraculous. You know, they have illusions, right? We say the people have illusions. They think by not having any struggle, the economy will improve. You know, if you give the corporations everything in this country, you know, gas prices will go down. Everything will be cool. What are you demonstrating about? What are you stopping the pipeline for? Come on, let's go. Let's get some jobs. And sometimes I think in the union movement, it's like the building trades. That's an inside thing, but you know, building trades, they'll build anything. You know, on toxic land, I should take that tape off. Don't say that. I have to explain it. I have to explain it, otherwise too long.
The other question I had is the speech is chilled to the extent that it seems to be. How could these more progressive groups actually go about organizing? Don't they have to be circumspect? I mean, how do they recruit? How do they do the kinds of activities that we take for granted here?
Well, that's what the military, I told you, you know, they're testing the waters. How can you have free speech? How can you organize? That's the problem. When I interviewed the independent unions, the young woman and the young man, I say, how difficult is it for organizers? You want to organize in a factory, which are nominally legal at best, as the brother said. You get transferred to a different department, you get fired, you get transferred to a different factory, or you're imprisoned and tortured. And the worst is you disappeared. That's what happens if you organize. And that's a worker at a plant where you have support. Kamal Abbas, one of the best known worker in Egypt, is under arrest for talking, you know, slandering this hack from the ETUF. So, okay, so it's selective though. Then you have protests, and you have of women and of people demanding the parliament, you know, engage in some real discussion, not about the Sharia, you know, not again passing an anti-pornography law, which was being discussed, but about real issues. Then, you know, they have a counter demonstration against them by the Muslim Brotherhood. And so then you have some protests that November, December, where people are massacred. Then you have the photos I showed you of where hundreds of thousands are allowed there. So that's why I say it's a stalemate in favor of the military. They still have to be selective. And that's why I really emphasize, thank you, immediate democratic and economic demands are the only way to go. Okay, why don't we wrap it up? Okay? And I'm here for talking, and if you want to buy any buttons or pins, you're welcome. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.